All right, so this is going to be the first kind of lab portion of the of our class. So this is basically going to be day one, pretty much just going through and how to develop a warm up. Some of you guys probably have some decent ideas about how to go about doing this. What we're going to do is kind of set up a framework for that will allow us to kind of just plug some things in and make our lives a lot easier versus just writing stuff down on the paper and making things kind of random. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So some primary purposes of a warm-up, the mental readiness is going to be huge. So if it's before a game, think about getting the jitters out a little bit and mentally preparing for what's about to come later on. If it's before a weight training session or something like that, maybe it's just a time to either kind of wake up and kind of get excited a little bit before training. So that can be a big thing. The physical aspect of it's obviously important. Not being warmed up and could potentially lead to some injury and stuff like that. So making sure that we're physically ready to go is obviously big time. And that ties in with the injury prevention, as we just talked about. Many of us aren't going to be ready to just hop right into the game or hop right into the resistance training session without having some sort of warm-up. So that's a big thing there. And then just overall performance. The warm-up should be looked at something that's trying to enhance performance and kind of push performance to a higher level versus just, all right, well, we're going to do a couple jumping jacks. All right, we're ready to go, right? So we're going to go through and talk about how to kind of set some of that stuff up. But some other benefits and general benefits of a properly designed warm-up and kind of things that we're after physiologically. So faster muscle contraction and relaxation of the muscles, improvement of rate of force development, which is basically how fast your muscles are going to be firing. So that can be increased, which again is going to push performance to be at a higher level. Reaction time, strength, power, oxygen delivery, blood flow. Again, all these things are going to be pretty important for performance or for whatever we're going to be doing for the day. So again, we should be looking at knocking these things out and trying to accomplish these things as we are designing our warm-up and as we're actually administering our warm-up. So movement preparation sequencing. So what we can do for this, and there's a couple different ways to do this. There's no right or wrong way. There's just some better ways, I'll say, in terms of being able to set up a warm-up. And so what this does for us is that this gives us an idea of, really, like I said, creates a framework for, being able to plug some exercises in and gives us like an outline that will help our athletes, help our clients, or help our people in rehab, essentially be prepared for whatever they're going to be doing for the day. Okay, so depending on what level they're at is going to be dependent on, what injuries they have and what sport they are, how old they are, things like that. But we can pretty much take this overall framework and apply it to pretty much all of our clients with different levels of progression and things like that. So let's start with the first one being the soft tissue mobilization. Okay, so soft tissue work, and the most common thing is going to be foam rolling, right? All of us have probably done that at some point. So generally, the idea for this is that you want to start with broad, slow scans, and basically that means going over certain body parts and seeing if there's any tight spots, essentially. And you can add pressure and small rocking motions to kind of help get some of that loosened up a little bit in terms of, some of those trigger points. Sorry. And then, so some things that you kind of want to stay away from. The goal for foam rolling is kind of dampen the nervous system and pull the nervous system down a little bit so then things can start to relax. So by doing things that are going to be high speed, so like high speed foam rolling and being very, very aggressive, isn't probably really going to allow you to do that. Also, if you're doing that, it could be kind of painful, and by having things be somewhat painful, you might kind of tense up, which is kind of the opposite of what we're actually after. And then sympathetic breathing patterns, which is basically fast breathing, stuff like that. You probably want to stay away from those when you're doing some foam rolling things or some soft tissue work in general, because again, the idea is that we're trying to dampen and calm the nervous system a little bit before doing some things. So I would say that foam rolling is pretty solid when it works pretty well, I think, before just an overall session and for clients just to kind of come in and do on their own. Personally, I don't spend a ton of time like leading people through like a foam rolling session unless it's like a recovery type day. But again, that can be something that they can do, knock out for 5 minutes before. they start the session, and then we can kind of get into some of the other stuff, which we'll talk about here in a sec. So some different ways to progress with the soft tissue work is that you can increase the hardness of the surface. Okay, so you might have a foam roller to a PVC, or a softer foam roller to a harder foam roller, things like that. You can go for a tennis ball to a lacrosse ball, to something even harder than that possibly. You can also decrease the surface area of whatever you're rolling with, and that can be a foam roller to a medicine ball, possibly. That can be a medicine ball to a lacrosse ball to a golf ball, so on and so forth. So just some different things there. So these are some examples of some soft tissue things that you can do. Again, you can take the foam roller behind the shoulder. You can you can take the lacrosse ball behind the shoulder, loosen some of that stuff up back there. You can go foam roller on the hamstring and on the calf, and you can see that this lady she has her opposite leg kind of on top of her foot here, which is probably going to be able to add a little bit of pressure onto this hamstring here, and that's fine. Or just to get it out of the way, I don't know. So there's a Theragun, which is also pretty cool. So they have these in therapy clinics and an athletic training room and stuff like that sometimes. And so basically what this will do is there's a little attachment at the end here, and it'll just kind of tap into the muscles a little bit and cause some vibration in there, and kind of help loosen up some of those tight spots. And it feels kind of weird, but it's pretty decent. There's this thing called the peanut. With this, you can put it, whether it be on your side here, you can put it where your vertebrae pretty much go in here, and you can hit either side of your vertebrae with that, up through your neck. I've seen people put this on their Achilles as well, where the Achilles isn't actually being in contact, but you're targeting some of the area, the tightness around that, which can be pretty good. And then just some glue stuff with the foam roller from there. So there's a bunch of different stuff. You guys can YouTube or Google, foam rolling or soft tissue work, and there's a bunch of cool stuff that will come up that will definitely help you out. So I would suggest probably doing that. The next one's going to be thermogenesis, right? So we look at the next portion of the of our framework, and we're looking at just basically raise. You might hear this section called the raise section. Basically, in this case, we're trying to raise the body temp, increase the blood flow, increase the pliability of the tissue, increase the oxygen uptake, engage with the athletes, engage with the clients, and just mentally prepare overall. So this is going to be the idea of this. And again, this might be a 5-minute section of your warm-up where, again, we're trying to accomplish these things within that. Okay, so some things that we can do for that, it might be just a general dynamic warm-up type stuff. So you might have your high knees, you might have your lateral shuffles, you might have some high kicks, some straight leg runs, some jump ropes, some ladder drills, and things like that. I think the ladder drills are pretty good for this raise or thermogenesis portion, because, again, it's going to help you with a little bit of coordination. It's going to help you just kind of get a little sweaty and kind of get your blood pumping a little bit. Will help you with deceleration a little bit. But so I think the warm-ups the ladders are probably best for things like that. Whether they make you better at agility, I don't really know, but no, probably not actually. But for the warm-up and just overall engagement and working on some coordination, I like it a lot. So some different things we can do there. Okay, and then the next section of this is going to be the mobility piece. Okay, so we think, all right, we did some foam rolling, we kind of loosened up some of the tissue. We did some thermogenesis, we kind of got some blood flow moving. We're kind of warmed up, we got oxygen intake coming up, tissues looking a little bit better in terms of that, and now we're going to look at overall mobility. Okay, so the idea behind this is that we're trying to introduce new range, basically meaning that we're trying to just increase range of motion within our joints. So, big areas that we're going to want to mobilize within our body, again, we just think, well, what joints need to be mobile? Okay, well, the ankles need to be mobile, right? The hips need to be mobile, in our thoracic spine and over our shoulders and things like that, those need to be mobile. Well, we know if those need to be mobile, then those are probably things that we need to target within the warm-up, right? Generally speaking, like, you're probably going to do, like, your ankles and your hips and your upper back are all going to be important for overall mobility, just in general. So it might be something that you might look at. Okay, so these are going to be big areas to look at for that. So some examples of what we can do for mobility. Again, we have some different hip variations within here. We have some banded ankle. We have some distraction work here where, again, this band goes around the ankle, which is allowing him to glide forward more, increasing range of motion and increasing dorsiflexion in the ankle. If this ankle is very, very tight, what you're commonly going to see in like squatting patterns is that their heels are going to come up off the floor as they're coming down into a squat. Generally, that means that someone has pretty tight ankles. So this is one thing that we can do to kind of address that. We have some T-spine rotations up here, so working on our upper back, and we also have some basically like a shoulder sorry, like an overhead position that's going to work on overall extension of our going to look at flexion of our shoulders and extension of our upper back. Again, it's working on being able to get into those different positions. Okay, so these are all some pretty solid examples. Again, there's a million things you can do for your ankles, a million things you can do for your hips, a million things you can do for your upper back. Okay, so this just gives us an idea of some things that we can do when we're actually working on some mobility type stuff. So now, stability now. Okay, so there's a big difference. Well, not a huge difference, but okay, now stability now. Now, the idea behind stability is that it's control to motion. Okay, we think mobility is going to be how far can you actively take a joint through its range of motion. We think stability, now we have to add control to that overall motion. Okay, so again, we look at big areas that we want to be able to stabilize within a warm-up. Well, we have the pelvis, right, in our lumbar. We have our knees, we have our shoulder, and stuff like that, right? So these are all areas that we're going to want to target when we're trying to work on stability, okay? So again, mobility, we're thinking how, far can we take a joint through the range of motion. Stability is looking at how controlled can you be during that range of motion. Okay, so we know that if we have bad knee stability, for example, like that's not generally going to be a good thing. Okay, if we have bad knee stability, chances are we're going to have some knee cave-in, which could lead to ACL tears. Okay, so there's some things that we can do to kind of target that. Okay, so from a stability standpoint, an activation standpoint, we can look at these things here. Well, look at glute bridge. All right. Well, we're activating the glutes and making sure that we have a stable pelvis. In here, from an activation standpoint, again, we're activating the glutes, going side to side. From our planking and like a bird dog type situation, again, we're looking at adding stability to the lumbar. So we're trying to add some control to this section, and then same here. We look over here, we have like a split squat hold. And in this case, we're looking at, again, making sure that the knee is going to be looking stable and targeting that. And then down here, we have like a push-up hold variation where we're looking at shoulder stability a little bit here. So again, you can think about this section being an activation or a stability standpoint. The big thing is like, hey, we just want to make sure that our joints are going to be stable and the muscles that we're using to make those joints stable are going to be active and ready to go. Generally speaking, if you want to look at activation, it's going to be a lot of glute. It's going to be a lot of midsection work, like core work. So by doing your glute bridges, doing your planks, doing these type of like bird dog type things, those are all going to be activating those muscles, which is going to help with stability. Okay, and then we have movement skill. Okay, so movement skill, we're looking at patterning, basically doing things that are going to be similar to what you're going to be doing for the day. Okay, patterning is super, super, super important. Think about this as being practicing and preparing for the movements that you're doing later. Okay, so if you have a resistance training session that involves squatting and bench press and, pull-ups, well, hey, guess what? You should probably be doing something later on in the warm-up that is going to look like squatting, bench press, and pull-ups. Well, maybe it's a body weight squats, maybe it's push-ups, or like a bench press with like a medicine ball where you're throwing it up, and again, something that might be overhead of some sort. Okay, so again, the idea is that we want to do things that are similar and prepare ourselves for what we're doing later on. That way, again, we think about this as practice, right? If we think about this as practice, and it's not going to be the first time we're seeing that movement pattern for when it's actually time to go. Right? It's either time to lift or it's time to play the game. So, some examples of that, all right? So, and now this can be also related to like sport, okay? So, let's go back to this. So, again, if we have a soccer game, for example, well, within the warm-up, we probably want to do something that looks like soccer, right? It makes sense. If we have a basketball game coming up, we probably want to do some stuff in the warm-up that looks like basketball. Okay, so we can come over here and we look at movement skill. Well, maybe we're doing, if it's before a game, maybe we do some foam rolling, we do some overall like raise our heart rate, raise our body temperature, stuff like that. We do some mobility, then do some stability, and then now we actually start pick up the ball. And now we actually start to pick up the ball and do some dribbling, do some drills, do some stuff like that. Same thing with soccer. We can do the same thing there. When it comes to a resistance training session, we can go through the same order, except for maybe now, again, just like what we talked about, we might just do things that look similar to what we're doing for the day. So let's say that we're doing a dumbbell overhead press. Well, maybe we grab these tubes and we press it overhead. If we're doing a bunch of rowing or pulling exercises, well, maybe we do face pulls because that looks similar to what we're doing for the day. Okay, maybe we have an Olympic lifting type session that we're having. Well, so maybe within the warm-up, we practice those movement skills that is gonna look like Olympic lifting with a PVC pipe. Okay, so this works pretty well towards the later half of the warm-up because now we're starting to get more specific, and now we're starting to lead into or get to pretty much our overall, our game, our session, our whatever we got going on. Okay, so this one's actually pretty important. Again, you want to do things that look like what you're doing for the day in the warm-up. And then the last one here. The last one's going to be power, potentiate, performance. You might hear all of these things. In this case, again, if you need it, if you feel like it's necessary, we're thinking higher speed type stuff. This might be a bunch of jumps. Things that are going to challenge your coordination. Things that are going to work on yourself being a little bit more reactive and springy and bouncy. Okay, so this might be with a ball as well, or it might not be. It just depends on what you're doing for the day. So this can be your jumps, your hops, your bounding, your again the med ball throws, stuff like that. This helps us out a lot because by doing these things that are faster pace and higher intensity, it's going to allow us to fire up our nervous system and make sure that we're ready to go. Okay, so this works pretty well. If you ever hear the term potentiate, that's basically what that means. It's firing up our nervous system, and that will help with performance down the road. Okay, so down the road meaning like during the game or during the session or whatever it is. So this is a good section. Again, if you have an older client and they're not going to be doing super explosive type stuff, then fine. You might tone this down a little bit, and again, you're not going to have your 80-some-year-old client do a bunch of jumps and stuff like that. But maybe they can throw a med ball here and there and just do things that may be a little bit faster to kind of get them ready to go, right? So again, that's this portion is kind of case by case, but I'll show you some examples here. So some things you might do, right? You might do some med ball work, you might do some weighted jumps, you might do some just general jumps. Sprinting. Okay, so sprinting is going to be obviously super important. Like if you don't do full speed sprints in your warm up, then you're having you're serving your athletes or you're underserving your athletes, I would say. What I would say with this for the full speed sprinting is that if you're preparing them for a game where they're going to be sprinting, then you need to sprint during your warm up. Essentially, their first sprint shouldn't be during the game. Again, it should be within the warm-up. Again, if it's a resistance training session, then sprinting is probably not as important. But like I said, just prepare them for stuff they're doing for the day. If they're squatting for today and they feel okay jumping and doing stuff like that, well, this motion right here, this is a squat. This is the definition of a squat. Okay, we can just add a jump to it, and it's going to fire up our nervous system and get us ready to go. Okay, now, what about static stretching? Okay, we didn't really talk much about static stretching. You can maybe pull some of this in with the mobility piece and stuff like that. But there's some pros and cons just like anything. Okay, the pros of static stretching is that you are able to get people through a deep range of motion possibly. Get them through, the required range of motion, and it kind of feels good. Sitting and holding a stretch for an extended period of time, it can be okay. It can feel pretty good. It can be pretty decent. The cons of doing this is that it's kind of boring, right? If you're leading people through a warm-up and you're just sitting, all right, touch your toes on the right side for 30 seconds and go. And then you sit there, 30 seconds, cricket, cricket, cricket. All right, switch, other side, 30 seconds. And then you do that for like 5 or 6, 7, 8 exercises, you're going to be there forever, right? So that would be one of the cons. Another con potentially is that if static stretching is the only thing that you're doing, then it could impact your strength and performance and your overall power. So again, it's not advised just to go in and do static stretching and then, all right, we're going to go play our soccer game now. And then you start sprinting and you feel terrible because you've just been stretching and moving slow the whole time, right? So there's pros and cons. My 2 cents on static stretching, I think it's fine within reason. I typically don't have it in some of the warm-ups for like the athletes for an extended period of time, or at least not a lot of it, just because it is kind of slow, it is kind of boring. If there are some big problem areas that I've found, then we'll spend a little bit more time doing some stuff that could be potentially static with that. But again, if your client wants it, they think it feels good, then do it. It's really on them. They're paying you the money, so if you feel like it's going to get them to keep coming back, then go for it. But like I said, I just would be careful with it. There's definitely some benefits. I think if you have to do static stretching in order to get you in the proper positions that you need to get in for squatting or whatever it is, then do it, right? And then follow it up with something a little bit more dynamic down the road. Okay, so for the sake of this class, I would like to stay away from static stretching for when you guys design the warm-up. But just know the pros and cons, and there's 2 coins, or 2 sides to every coin for that. So, all right, so last thing here. So some coaching tips for a more effective warm-up. Couple things that we need to consider when we're actually up there making a warm-up, right? So if you guys are going to be sport coaches, if you're going to be strength conditioning coaches, athletic training, physical therapy, whatever, like you're going to be working with people, and it might be 1-on-1, it might be 30-on-1, who knows? Okay, so the big couple things here, make sure everyone can see you. So make sure that you're in a position where everyone can see you, can see your demos, can see what's going on for that. Step-by-step cues. Cues are going to be short phrases for what you are doing. So you want to try to keep things to very minimal. You want to keep the cues minimal, and it should just be step-by-step. So if you're going to cue and coach up a squat, say your client's never done it and you're showing them a bodyweight squat, then you just want to keep it as easy as this. All right, guys, we're going to do a bodyweight squat. Here's how we do it. Both feet shoulder width. Hips are going to come down and back. You're going to push through the floor and stand up. Do 10 reps or whatever you're doing. Okay, keep it light, keep it short, keep it easy to understand. Make corrections, offer variation. Okay, so if you're up in front of the group, you need to be able to see everyone as well. So if you are throwing out cues, if you're throwing out corrections or things to focus on, chances are if you address one person, there's probably someone else that's doing it wrong. So then they're hopefully all going to fix each other for that. And then if they can't do it because maybe it's too hard, then you need to have a variation ready to go. It's like, hey, if you can't do this, then drop your knee to the floor and go from there. Or if you can't do normal push-ups, then make sure you drop to your knees, do push-ups that way, and so on and so forth. Okay, so for everything that you do, you need to be able to have a variation to make it easier. The flow of the warm-up is very important. Okay, so if you are doing mobility, stability stuff, whatever, like you don't want people to be on the ground, up to standing, on their back, on their side, standing again, so on and so forth. With that, like, people are going to be rolling around like a fish. You want to probably stay away from that, especially if you have older clients. Them getting up and down off the ground can be very difficult. Time management. Okay, so time management is going to be huge. You need to make sure that you're at a good pace, and you don't necessarily have to wait till everyone's done. If you have a group of 20 and there's one person that's a little bit slow, and it throws off the flow of everything, where half the people are, waiting for that person, that person will catch up. And if they don't get one rep in, then again, fine. Again, we want to make sure the flow is, the time is, at a good pace, and make sure that you're being aware of your time for sure. Do things that's similar to what they're doing in the session. So we talk about that in terms of patterning, right? So if you're sprinting, they need to be sprints in the warm-up. If you're squatting, then there needs to be some sort of squatting thing in the warm-up. And then these last couple things, right? Have a little fun, use equipment, use a partner, be interactive. These things can go a long way, and by using equipment, it can potentially just kind of mix some things up and really allow for people to be more engaged. Same thing with using a partner. Say, all right, you and a partner, you're gonna do whatever, throw the med balls back and forth to each other. You're gonna go. You're both going to hold each other's arms, and you're both going to squat down as far as you can, and you're going to hold for 5 seconds and then stand back up. There's a million different partner type exercises that you can do that will make it fun, that'll make it engaging, that'll make people just want to be there, which is kind of what we're after. And you can have fun, you can play games. Okay, so before a resistance training session, just to kind of get the competitive juices flowing, we play a lot of games. Like, I work with the men's basketball team, so at least once a week we'll usually do some sort of like competition, quick little fun game. Like we've played like Ultimate Med Ball, which is basically like Ultimate Frisbee but with a med ball. So we've played that. We've played a bunch of like tag type, reactive type games and stuff like that. It's fun, and we're getting something out of it for sure. But they're smiling, they're laughing, and by the time we're done with that, their competitiveness is up, and now we're ready to hit the weights or do conditioning or whatever we're doing, and it makes for a really high energy type session. So those are the big things there. So make sure you take a look at this and keep this in mind as you guys are developing your warm-up, and really think about how you would apply it to like a large group, and really make the warm-up for a larger group and for people to be in front of you. Okay, so this is money. Remember these. If you guys do internships at Salisbury, if you guys go somewhere else, there's a high chance that you're going to be leading a warm-up at some point. So this will come back and definitely help you out. So let me know if you have any questions, and we'll figure out a time to talk.